Welcome back, AP. Welcome back to it. Welcome back to your flipped classroom and our continuing discussion of the lead up to the revolutions of 1848, right? We are now getting into a pivotal moment in European history, which is actually kind of undersold because when you literally look at these standards that I'm given to teach y'all by and stuff like that, the Unit 6 standards actually really only go into a little bit about the revolutions of 1848, but I still feel that they're a very, very important moment in European history as 17 different revolutions are going to break out all over Europe all at once, right? Which is absolutely wild. So the thing about it, though, that we need to understand is it's going to be preceded by some pretty big stuff. And remember, we're trying to keep this flip about 15 minutes flat, right? Because y'all, of course, are that one disadvantaged group of children that are going to have me twice this week, but you have me one day after the other, which is pretty tough, right? So we're not going to try to pound this stuff too hard. We're just going to try to go over as much as we can, right? But where we left off in class, we were talking about this time period known as the Hungry 40s. And we're talking about the Hungry 40s, we're talking about the 1840s, which is a time period that is going to see widespread famine, scares of food scares, okay, and food supplies being at a very, very low, okay? And the reason why this happened is because some areas of Europe are still going to use primitive agricultural practices, and they're going to be lagging behind in things like crop rotation, technology, and still using feudal-era systems, right? Now, the thing about it, though, is that the best example that actually caused this Hungry 40s, more so than anything else, is this thing known as the Irish Potato Famine, right? Also known as the Great Famine, which is going to lead to the starvation and impoverishment of over 1 million and something people, right? So going into it, what you need to understand, though, is that obviously all of this revolves around one area and one crop, right? We're talking about Ireland, and of course the crop of theirs known as the potato, right? Now the potato is going to be a very, very crucial thing that we saw going off of post-exploration, right? Columbus, of course, is going to do that whole journey. He's going to run into North and South America, which will then begin a large-scale process of Europeans interacting with natives and an exchange of crops going down, right? So something that we need to remember, though, is where the potato was originally found, right? So the potato was originally found in Peru. The Incans actually grew them, okay? And the Incans are then going to actually show them to the Europeans, right? And show them how easy they are to grow. Because all you need to grow 2 pounds of potatoes is 1 square inch of a potato with an eye on it, right? All it needs is an eye and 1 square inch, and it will turn into 2 pounds of potato. So when you think about it really quick, why would a crop like that be given to people like Irish, agricultural workers? Why are the Irish going to be given heavy amounts of potatoes to grow for themselves? Well, they're calorie dense, right? They're a very calorie dense food. And out of all of the vegetables, they are considered the most satiating, right? Which actually that means they make you feel fuller for longer, right? Well, going into it, what you have to understand is that the potato crop is going to be given to the poor workers so they can grow an excessive amount of food. And so also while they're working on these rich, wealthy landowners' holdings to grow things like grain and barley for the rest of the areas of Europe and then also for the rest of the British Isles, okay? So the causes of this potato famine, though, one of them has to do with extreme population growth, right? So the population in Ireland had gotten out of order, right? It had gotten really, really aggressive and very, very high, mostly due to the fact that people were getting married at a very much younger age because they only needed a small amount of land to grow potatoes on to actually enough to keep their entire family alive. So, and they were also, since they were getting married younger, they were having children younger, and so you saw a population spike going into the 1840s in Ireland. The potato also was a staple food crop, right? For workers, because they could be easily given this whole crop to actually go out there and grow grain, which is going to heavily relate to those corn laws, right? Irish workers were very, very well known for farming the grains that actually the corn laws were making money off of. And then the other thing about it, though, is the biggest thing that causes it is a potato blight fungus, okay? So fungal diseases are well known for knocking out huge swaths of crops, right? And the potato blight fungus is actually going to attack the common brown potato, which is actually a monoculture disease, all right? So here's the biggest reason why the Irish potato famine got out of order. Because the Incans, when they had potatoes, did they ever have a potato famine? No, mostly due to the fact that they actually grew over 129 different types of potatoes, including sweet potatoes, yams, and other things like taro root as well, which is actually a cousin of the potato root. It's a tuber vegetable. So going into it, though, what's going to end up happening is the Irish are only going to grow one type of potato, the common brown potato. And the thing is that fungal diseases like blight can be transferred via touch or just by the wind or by the roots themselves. So one potato gets it, the rest of the potatoes are going to get it. And it causes this, like the fruit or the actual yield vegetable to mold from the inside out and rot, right? And so what are the effects of this going to be? You're going to see the starvation of over 1 million Irish people. Over 1 million Irish people will starve to death, which I think is the worst way to go. We were talking about that in class today. What's the worst way to go, right? Some of you are like, oh, fire, drowning, stuff like that. I think starving to death might be the worst way to go, right? Because it takes weeks, and also your body begins to like consume itself, okay? And then it makes you consider things like cannibalism and stuff like that. Also, what's going to happen though as well is the British government is going to do little to nothing to help alleviate the pressures of the potato famine on the actual Irish workers. And so what's going to happen is many of them are going to choose to immigrate, right? Over 2 million Irish people immigrated to new countries, including a major port of destination being the United States, right? A heavy amount of Irish workers are actually going to actually immigrate over to the United States. There's also going to be a rapid decrease in the availability of breads and grains, right? Because the thing is that not only did the Irish farm large amounts of grains for Great Britain, but also the rest of Europe is still rekindling their relationship with agriculture after Napoleon came in and took over the entire thing, right? So since the actual Great Famine that occurred in Ireland will also spread and then affect some of the potatoes in other areas as well, you're going to see a rapid decrease in the availability of bread and grain because the workers are dying from starvation, which means it's going to lead to a rise in bread prices, right? Leading to very large-scale riots, all right? Whenever bread prices go up, it's almost an indication that something bad's going to happen, right? Now, the thing that is something bad that happened is just like in the 40s again. We are in the hungry 40s. We're now in the 1840s as well. We're still in that moment. Everyone is hungry. Everyone is mad. No one has enough money to buy bread. People are working in factories and getting their hands cut off. Like, right, you're working in the mines, getting run over by carts and stuff. Things are getting at an all-time bad, okay? And so what you're going to see is this thing known as the revolutions of 1848. We talked about this a little bit in class the other day where I told y'all a story about my dad who like brews beer, right? And he brews beer on his own, and there's one process where you have to boil the malt and you have to cook the malt when you're making beer, right? The thing about it though is if you do not keep an eye on it, that pot will boil over and spread all over your kitchen, and it's disgusting. That's an image I want you to think of when you think of the revolutions of 1848. I want you to think of a pot boiling over, just spilling all over the ground, because the conditions of European history and of European industrialism has now made it almost impossible for people to live the lives they want to live, and they feel as though their government is to blame, right? And the thing about it is that liberals want constitutions and nationalism. Socialists want direct government help, food, workers' rights. Remember, famously enough, liberals and conservatives said they don't want socialists to vote because socialists tend to vote with their stomachs, right? They want to be fed, they want to be taken care of, and they want the government to intervene and actually give them better economic opportunities, right? Now, what the conservatives want is just to crush their efforts, right? So the revolutions of 1848 are going to happen when the liberals and the socialists come together and they go at the conservatives all at once, right? Because beforehand, whenever Metternich was going into the Kingdom of the Two Sicilies and crushing a constitution, whenever he was passing decrees called the Carlsbad decrees to make sure that liberal professors weren't spreading their ideas throughout different areas of Austria, whenever the Russians are using the secret police and then also serfdom to divide liberals and socialists away from one another, what's going to happen in 1848 is the liberals and the socialists are going to finally unite together and be a huge force that will attack the conservatives directly and lead to these things called the revolutions of 1848. When they have been divided, the conservatives can stop them. But now when they come together, they're going to be almost impossible to stop, right? And there is a common pattern for these 17 revolutions that broke out all over Europe in the span of 1 year, right? So you have, first and foremost, the springtime, right? Okay, so now during the spring of 1848, so during about give or take March to April, you see these things pop up, right? You see these revolutions of 1848 occur. And this era is known as the springtime of the people, right? The springtime of the people, kind of just like flowers coming out of the ground to set their blooms and bloom beautifully like the tulips of Amsterdam. The springtime of the peoples is referring to these revolutions growing out of the ground and bursting into life, right? Liberals and socialists united together to huge amounts of success. Then you had the summer, which is when socialists and liberals are going to realize, though, that they do not agree on everything, right? So what's going to happen is the socialists and the liberals get the things they want, but then they start realizing that they disagree. One of the best examples of this is universal suffrage, right? So socialists think everyone should vote. Liberals think only some people should vote, okay? So those divisions will emerge around the summertime. And then by the fall, you're going to see conservatives begin to reorganize a little bit, accrue militaries, try to come up with ways to stop these different reform movements from going down. And then by the following spring and summer, revolutionary regimes will be overthrown because the conservatives are actually going to get armies, get together, and then they're going to use each other's forces to kind of stop and suppress most of these revolutions. You could argue that all 17 of the revolutions of 1848 were failures. Now, I disagree with this as somebody who studies history. I think anytime you see the collective end of serfdom, it's a pretty good thing. But the revolutions of 1848 are argued by many historians to be a failure, right? Mostly due to this key point right here, right? The fact that the revolutionary regimes that were originally set up during this springtime are going to be overthrown, right? Now, a lot of that has to do with the fact as well that the conservatives are going to kind of coax the middle-class liberals back over to their side a little bit, but there are going to be some pretty common patterns regardless. Now, we're going to focus on the big three revolutions of 1848. France, Prussia, and Austria, right? So starting off with France, you have to understand that ever since the Three Glorious Days, ever since 1830, when Charles X abdicated the throne, his son was king for 20 minutes, and they bring in this guy named Louis Philippe I, you're going to see people be dissatisfied, right? The socialists and the liberals are angry and dissatisfied with Louis Philippe I, mostly due to the fact that they think that he is just as conservative as the leaders that came before him, right? They issued pamphlets where they called him a pear, which they actually say, oh my God, look, you can see him turning into a pear in front of our eyes. Because a pear is an insult from a French person being like an idiot or a goof, right? They also think that he's not helping out the working class people, so much so that a guy actually built this machine to assassinate him, right? That's 25 gun barrels all created into one big thing that's supposed to fire 400 rounds all at once. And it's called the Infernal Machine, or however you say the Infernal Machine in French. And this is what happened to the guy that actually built that bad boy. He ends up dead, and that's his severed head, because as you can see in the background, there's the guillotine. He ends up being executed because of his failed assassination attempt on Louis Philippe. Apparently 400 bullets came out of that bad boy, and actually only one of them even came close to killing Louis Philippe, and it grazed his forehead, right, and actually missed him. And then what ended up happening, though, as well, is as you can see on the severed head right here, there's some scars and stuff like that on his face, because this thing actually blew up when he actually set it off. Now, going into it, though, bread riots are being caused by the famine, and the Great Famine, and the Irish Potato Famine, are going to sweep through Paris, and Louis Philippe is going to have the military shoot them, which is a terrible idea, big fella. So when these bread riots begin to spill into the streets in Paris at the very early onset of 1848, back when, of course, these bread riots are going to occur because they should be getting a lot of grains from this, going into the spring, but the bread cost was out of order. So when they assembled into the streets to basically have another showing of togetherness, the socialists and the liberals begin to demand price controls. Louis Philippe has many of them shot, killing 50 different people. Now, what is the way to solve this whole thing? The French decide, let's build some barricades, right? Now, if there were ever an Olympic sport of barricade building, the French would win every single time. The French can build a mean barricade, right? Good luck getting your military down that road right there, okay? So the barricades are going to be thrown up, and Louis Philippe is going to abdicate out of fear, right? The monarchy is going to be abolished again. So we are now getting into another French Republic, and that's going to be the ushering in of this thing called the Second French Republic, right? And we're going to talk about really, really quickly during class how that's all going to blow up in everybody's face and how it's going to get even worse as time goes on. But we'll talk about the introduction of Napoleon III. We'll talk about how basically what's going to go down is just don't make everybody so upset. Control the price of bread, man. It's not that serious. Now, look, but we'll talk about that soon when I see y'all in class, okay?